Hey, welcome back to the What Not to Do in Entrepreneurship podcast. And it's episode 3 already, isn't it, Sanjeev?
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Man,
Time flies.
time sure does fly. Time sure does fly. I was thinking back to the last 2 episodes and, all the stuff that we went through. And it's just, it's just densely packed stuff. Like there's some really good stuff that, frankly, I wish I knew 6 years ago when I kicked off my company, but you know, I got here as fast as I could, man. So I'm glad to meet you when I
I could
did.
say that about I could say that also, Michael, about myself.
Yeah.
Is that I wish I had the What Not to Do book when I was going through all the challenges of building an entrepreneurial business
Yeah.
and making this as a career of life. And so you're not the only one. I am with you in the same boat. As wish there was some light to our challenges before, but it's like you say, it's never too late, and here we are.
That's right. That's right. Well, if anybody's just now getting familiar with this podcast and you're like, I'm going to start this in the middle, I'm going to start at episode 3 just to introduce ourselves. My name is Michael Fritz, friends and family, and you call me Fritz. I'm the host and executive producer of this podcast. And my co host, Sanjeev Chitri, is a guy who's started multiple businesses. And he has gotten to the point where he knows there's a lot of things out there, a lot of resources that say, well, here's what to do if you're going to be an entrepreneur, but he wants to show you what not to do. That's something that we don't often talk about because it's like a negative thing. Got to be positive, good frame of mind. And there's some landmines out there that you just should not step on. And he's stepped on quite a few. I've stepped on quite a few. And so the show is all about, I guess, comparing notes, but also kind of digging into this book that he's written called What Not to Do in Entrepreneurship. So this is episode 3. We got some cool things to talk about. And Sanji, I want to ask you a question here. And I did a little bit of looking, and I took some notes about this. I was surprised to hear that globally 20,000 companies are started up every single day. I would have thought it's every year, but every day, 20,000 companies every day. And 90% of them fail in the first 3 years, which is pretty sobering. So I guess the first question as we kick things off here is there a method to the madness of just, I guess, digging your own grave, leaving aside the fact that, more people are attracted to starting businesses and then they have really depressing outcomes? Like, how do you suggest people do deal with that? Are there any tools that you outline in the book to change that success rate?
Well, thank you, Michael, for the statistics. And I believe, Michael, those statistics that you outlined um, are 2018-19 statistics. I was reading the same statistics that you were.
Yeah.
I tried to look at the most updated versions of it. We don't have a global number, but we do have a US number. Pandemic impacted a little bit of the emotions of entrepreneurs, but it also ignited a lot of the stuff post the pandemic, because people realized that, from what they experienced during pandemic, that the world is now flat,
Right.
and so the old marketing techniques have changed, the old communication techniques have changed, and new tools are in place, and like Zoom became the most popular known tool used by every household, and so they had to use that as a business tool effectively. So things like that have created a huge push for mental state of human beings, both men and women, to pursue the possibility of entrepreneurship. And so, like you said, is there a method to this madness? We must take a look at, why is the madness? What is the cause of this madness? It's one thing to say there is madness and we need to find a method to this madness, but we also need to, if we have to find a solution, we have to find the root of the challenge that is driving this madness or expanding this madness.
Right.
And I believe everything in the world of existence is either driven by greed or by fear. And so religion dominates fear and money dominates greed. Now,
Hmm.
religion
Yeah.
and money are at times together also.
Right.
And so the outcome of the past pandemic 3 to 3, 4, 5 years to have changed and raised the bar of awareness, which is you see nearly every day in the newspaper that this has become a unicorn or is $100 billion went at a valuation of 1 billion or $500 million went, and those things that are highlighted for the right purpose by the press so that readers can read to them create the disillusion that everyone can create a unicorn or $1 billion entrepreneurship.
Right.
And that is the real sort of the impetus behind this, because you see billion dollar companies happening never heard before, like in India, and not one two but maybe 10, 20. Obviously there may be thousands and thousands of startups, but those are the ones that get highlighted. Then the greed takes over of a mind, because if that can be done, then why can't I do it? And that is what is really, really driving the number of uh, men and women in entrepreneurship together.
Hmm.
And so historically, and I just want to mention this as a part of our conversation, is that historically entrepreneurship was sort of a main male dominated segment, you know but as has happened in the US colleges, 60% of the admissions are now women. Entrepreneurship has become a fascination and an engagement for women.
Hmm.
And but the men have learned, the men population have learned over the years, from other people, mentors, and they have some access to it. And women entrepreneurs who should be even more successful don't have those tools. So part of my sort of writing this book was to again level the field between men and women as entrepreneurs. Because what has been learned throughout the years as experience can be read in a book like this, so that women don't have to make those lots of mistakes and have the mentorships that they need, how to reach it, how to reach capital, all of that. There are in the right path of knowing what to do more better, because you eliminate what not to do. So I look at the tool also as expanding the amount of entrepreneurship that you just said to not just the men population, but to a global woman population also.
Right.
So I hope, and I therefore see the number of 20,000 or so that you mentioned, not only escalating because of the engagement of a larger breadth of population, half the population, more than half the population in the world is women, to be driving this number even higher. Now, having said that, we don't need more failures or relative setbacks, because failure is a state of the mind. We need probabilities of more success. And
Mhm.
the mission of the book has always been to transform the art of entrepreneurship into a science of predictable success or science of creating wealth.
Right.
And so, which means that we must provide tools in the toolbox, as I have said last time. And so, on a very, very, so there will be tools at the macro level, there will be tools at the micro level, and we need to just see what tools fit your particular enterprise or your particular thought process, because not all the tools are required for every aspect of it.
Right.
So that's what I meant by the tools in the toolbox. You can and reading different chapters and not reading this like a novel is important, because these are different tools in different chapters, different interviews in different chapters. So one should choose and use effectively what is important to them, and choose the tools and make them use as your toolbox. So at the macro level of entrepreneurship, there are definitely significant elements that come just outright for building success. And that particular thought process is very more used in the technology space, because as I define in the book, there are different kinds of entrepreneurship, and not every entrepreneurship has the same risk profile. Type of entrepreneurship has the same risk profile and the reward profile. So I'll take the most challenging one first, which is the highest risk versus the highest reward, right? And that's something people normally affiliate with entrepreneurship. But if you look at it, a guy who is opening another Motel 6 is also an entrepreneur. A
Right.
guy who is doing a grocery store and a restaurant is also an entrepreneur. A guy or girl, excuse me, a business person, you are making masks because they are required more as opportunist for COVID, is also an entrepreneur, right?
Right.
And a person who gets up today and buys a company with his father's money or somebody else's money and builds, so called the buy then build, is also an entrepreneur. So, and obviously then the last one, which kind of is the disruptive entrepreneurship, or what you would consider as the tech minded based entrepreneurship.
Right.
Now, there it's the risk versus rewards are the highest in those kinds of tech-based entrepreneurship. So let me, kind of, because that's where the failures are the most, because the risks are the more,
Hmm.
and therefore let's attack that as the first element of how to enable or how to qualify for any opportunity for maximizing success. And do you have any questions, Michael,
Well,
as well?
I had a thought, and I meant to email you this about this idea over the weekend, but years ago I read something where they're talking at the startup level, like for software companies, for example, because that's a place I play in, where they say, okay, the type of people that you bring in at the beginning, they're kind of like commandos. They're just like running and gunning, and they love risk, and they're just like da 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 da, And then as the company gets to be bigger and it starts to scale, then you start to see, okay, we've got more processes in place, we've got more stability, so that changes what type of people to hire. And I made this connection, and I'm like, I got to get with Sanjeev and tell him this. And then I got busy and I wasn't able to email you, but essentially what you're doing with what not to do in entrepreneurship is you're making it more stable. You're making it more, like you said, going from an art to a science with starting and sustaining businesses. And when when I realized that, like, all the people that are out there starting up companies, they're like commandos. You're actually training up people to be the next stage where they get the process, they understand the science behind it. And it's, to me, it's mind blowing that you're doing this, because you're going to have a huge effect on the economy. I know that, but like I just realized it, and I'm like, dude, like you're doing some huge things. You're moving mountains, and we're only 3 episodes in. This is crazy. but but I did have a question. I was curious. When it comes to, if we're talking about 20,000, it's going to be plus, because like you said, that's 2018, 2019 statistics. um 20,000 companies, like, are there any kinds of filters that you think should be applied? Like, what are some ways to, I guess, disqualify certain ideas? Like, nah, that's not really a good direction to go. That's not really a business that needs to be made. Like, are there any filters that would come into
Yes,
play
yeah,
here?
yes, of course. That is the correct word, I believe, is the filters, and that's what I was going to also kind of move forward to. But I do want to address exactly what you just asked or what you just mentioned before, and maybe we can address, since you bring up the filter issue, I can address that first and then come back to what you were talking about. So, especially when you want to reduce risks or mitigate risks, I can assure you, anybody who says that there is no risk in business is a bullshitter, right? It's horseshit,
Yes, it is.
right? There is, and anybody who says that I have no competitor just is dreaming. It's just not the right way to even present. So, because we have to position anything in an marketplace, as you know, the business is just merely a transaction in a marketplace.
Right.
Something you make, something somebody wants. And if somebody wants it, it's if more valuable, you get a higher profits. If it is less valuable, more people make it, it is less profit. It isn't any complicated economic theory than that at the base level of it, right?
Right.
So I was seeking, and one of the interviewees really enabled me in this space. He is a entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, a startup engine provider, and his name, I mean, he is Prakash, Prakash Palera. I have interviewed him, but there is where a true resonance occurred of what I was seeking and what he was using in practice.
Right.
So the filters there are, I believe, in any sort of technological startup concepts or very high risk concepts. There are four fundamental filters. The first one has got to be whichever market I am or the entrepreneur is going to be addressing. Is that an established market or is that a confused market? Right?
Okay.
Because for you to go and replace someone entrenched in an established market, you are trying to move mountains. Right?
Right.
Absolutely, are moving mountains. So, you know, uh, it it's like the construction industry. It's huge, and you are now going to start a new construction industry. Well, it's a huge mountain to replace, right?
Right.
So the concept of what does that mean in terms of, is the market confused? Let me take a real example, and that's easy to explain.
Okay.
If you look at Elon Musk, he knows this methodically and extremely well. When he decided to do PayPal, now I'm pretty sure when he first did it, he wasn't as aware of it. Stars got aligned.
Hmm.
As everything else in life, in the younger age, we can call them luck, call opportunity, whatever that is. But for sure, in the case of Tesla or SpaceX, when he came into the EV market, there was the gasoline cars looking for efficiencies. There were the hybrid cars trying to expand efficiencies. There were the hydrogen fuel cars that were trying to make sure that you eliminate, take long ranges. Then there were the EV cars. It's not like he was the first creator of an electric vehicle. Nissan had Leaf, and Chevy had Volt, and all of those kinds of things,
Hmm.
right? So what he understood was that this market cannot decide what they want, which I consider that as a confused mindset of the buyer in the marketplace.
Okay.
That was one. Then the next thing is, if you want to build something of size and something of value for you, because entrepreneurship is about creating wealth,
Hmm.
the next thing is how next filter is the market filter. So the first filter, I call it, is the market confused? Then the size of the market. How big is the market? Is it if you are going to cause a change and disruption in a very small market, you are putting a lot of efforts, so the return on value for your efforts is not as much because the market itself is smaller. So,
Right.
what is the size of the market? So in the case of Tesla, it was a huge marketplace. In this case of space, it was a huge marketplace, right?
Hmm.
Then the third, I believe, is the uniqueness filter, which is very critical. What is the differentiation you or your venture can bring into this confused market, which is very large? Very important.
Hmm.
Because if there is no differentiation, you are one of the other monkeys. You
Right.
know. So it is important to know what is the differentiation. And in his case, the differentiation was not the EV, but the software ability to program remotely, etc., that brought the whole technology into the EV space, which Nissan could have done it, but they didn't. They didn't think that was important.
Right.
So what he brought together was the ability to program everything about the damn car remotely, even from your braking speeds. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So a technological uniqueness into a differentiated created a different unique differentiation into a large market that was confused.
Right.
And then the last thing was, do you have a team? And in his case, he didn't really build a team. There existed an effort of a company that he invested in, took over, etc., etc. He didn't start Tesla from nothing. There was an existing ongoing operation in which he invested. Right?
Right.
But it doesn't matter. He had the team. So the four filters are, again, just to summarize, is the market established or confused? Is the market large? Does your thought process, venture, technology have uniqueness? And do you have a team to execute all of the three benefits you have? And that is a very fundamental filter to knowing before you even undertake whether you have a higher probability of success or a lower probability of success. Then, of course, the capital, etc., comes in place.
Yeah.
So that is what, Michael, is my suggestion to entrepreneurs to get that discipline in your mind and create that possibility to be able to have a highest probability of building success in their venture.
I really, really like that. And the only reason why I wasn't furiously taking notes while you were saying that is because the microphone would pick it up and the people listening would just hear taka 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 taka, because that thing about uniqueness that has always been stuck in my head. I mean, there's a lot of things that I would love to do, but sometimes I'm like, ah, it's not unique. But actually, some aspects of it are. Going back to the example you used, where yeah, there were companies out there that were still making electric vehicles. Um, he's still doing it. He's still making electric vehicles, but the uniqueness is in something about it. There's some aspect of it that's wildly different from everybody else. And it takes a certain kind of mind to look at what's out there, what's real, what exists today, and kind of see that negative space. So I'm excited. I'm excited about the next episode happening later. And I'm curious just for the folks listening in on this one, what subject are we going to be talking about next time? What do you got in mind?
Well, I believe that uh, in order to transform everything into some kind of a scientific format of following. We need to have look at history, track history, and try to transform history into some kind of level of success, what I have put together in what is called as a 7-year journey of an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And in that process, wanted to cover always for entrepreneurs how to maximize the probability of success, and how to develop the reputation of being a successful entrepreneur. It is much better to, in my opinion, to get small successes, build a track record, than to try to be a home run hitter and keep on swinging the bat all the time. But there has to be science behind it, or some kind of database analysis behind it. And I have taken that into a 7-year journey of an entrepreneur, from startup to success, or from ideas to exit, and try to share that with the readers and with other entrepreneurs so they can make a logical decision on what definition of success are they comfortable with. So that's the other thing. Now, I do want to go back, Michael, and address the thing that you brought up. What was the question that you were asking me? Just repeat for the readers, or the listeners, that question that you asked me when you I began the answer of the filters.
Oh no, I forgot what the question was. I
Okay.
forgot what the question was. Do you remember? I hope. I mean,
Okay. So I believe that one of the things that you want the readers to know, in the journey of the entrepreneurship, that comes to their mind, is fundamentally when you are assessing risks,
mhm,
when you are, or how does an entrepreneur even think of what is a risky situation.
mm,
It is in general uncomfortable to think something at an entrepreneur level. Either you are totally afraid of the situation, you don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, or you just kind of jump in the
right,
situation.
right.
And so the challenge that an entrepreneur has is, jumping in has a certain level of intellectual strength and intellectual awareness. But I want this to be not a jumping in. I would like this to be a methodical plug in or walk in, with a strategy kind of stuff. And so I believe your question really was, when you think of entrepreneurship, and we can go back to your question precisely, how does one kind of decide to jump in, or to sort of engage in the spirit of entrepreneurship. Now, let me give you some example of uniqueness, and I think this is good for you, because I don't want to always talk about Teslas and other people, because that's analysis from the past. But I do want to give you an example of something that is particular to me, and in the 4 filters that you used, and I wanted to close this dialogue, or this episode, with that.
Mhm,
See, when I wanted to do wines, just as a hobby sake, I was pursuing, under the deck of my house. I built a little lab, and for lack of any other name, because my nephews and nieces called me Juju, I called it Juju Lab. Nothing more, nothing more, no more intelligent than that to it. But I did know that if you look at wine as a history, everybody is doing the same way the old priests did the wine. Yeah, the containers have changed, the barrels have become sophisticated, but and the yeasts have changed, but fermentation is fermentation and stuff like that.
mhm,
And fundamentally, the snobs continue to be the snobs, and the hobs don't know what the hell the snobs are saying. So, but the market for wine is big. So I was thinking, why does a family of all of us go to a restaurant and we get the chef to do amazing separate dishes, and we yet order the same red and the white wine, all of us, and drink with the same glass? Is that fair to the whole purpose of tastefulness? And so I created, based on that, the thought process of doing food specific wines. And in that food specific wines, in order to enable food specific wines, I had to find and invent, and or rather, innovate the science of umamis and kokumai to the next level of as implementable in wines, and therefore changing the way consumers think and taste wine. And my purpose in doing that was to really create for my friends with this new science of umami and kokumai, which has never been used in the science of vinology or making wines. And that created one of the most unique differentiators, in addition to the fact that we were technologically able to change something that takes 5, 7 years of aging into what we call as the dynamic barreling, which takes maybe less than 2 to 4 weeks of aging, equivalent of the aging that you get out of the barrels, right? And so as a result of that, we were able to bring uniqueness in Juju Labs, then overnight got transformed from being an hobby to a significant sized venture with a huge momentum, with exclusive contracts with the Mardi Gras World and other organizations like that. And so it is whatever I have shared with you there. Is the market confused? Yes, because you have the seltzers, you have the sweet wines, you have the spicy wines, you have the alcoholic wines, total confused marketplace. Is their market large? Yes, it's a 60, $70 billion market.
Mhm.
Is there a unique differentiation? Yes, yes, yes. And then, do I have the team? Well, when I started, I had only a team of two, and now we have a team of 25 plus. But
Wow.
that is the process, and all of this within an 18-month period. And so the ability to use that knowledge into transforming ideas into business opportunities really works. And I give that to you as my personal experience. So with that, I wanted to try to have bring this to a conclusion, if that's okay with you.
It's gonna have to be okay. I just looked down and noticed that we're a few minutes over, but I didn't realize how hardcore you were into wine. And that is, man, if you can do that with kombucha, I need to get you in touch with my wife because it takes us like 2 weeks to make a batch of booch. But well, I agree. I think it's going to be a good stopping point. And for the folks that are listening in, get ready because he has got an awesome book, What Not to Do in Entrepreneurship. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be able to apply a lot if you've even thought about starting a business. This book is going to help you filter it down, of course, as to whether it's a good business to start or not start, and give you some good guidelines, some good principles to abide by to make it a lot safer. And it's poised to change the face of business ownership for probably centuries. So we'll go ahead and close. And as always, it's a pleasure and a blessing to meet with you, sir. And I look forward to catching up with you in the next episode. All right.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.